Alright everyone, it's time to talk about further what the Turkish referendum means outside of Turkey. I've already weighed in on that. I think that it's going to be a disaster for the Turkish people. It'll certainly lead to protests. It'll certainly lead to some violence, maybe some riots. Whether it causes like civil war, revolution, that remains to be seen. It does seem that there was a significant split between sort of the coastal, more Europeanized regions of Turkey as opposed to central Turkey, as well as some of the Kurdish-style outlands. Oddly enough, those Kurds appear to have voted largely against the referendum. I wonder why. Could it be Erdogan's own false flagging of them constantly or something like that? It's time to talk about, though, the wider effect and why there is a silver lining. For the Turkish people, it's basically all negative. You now have chosen to hold, a bunch of people came onto my channel, Erdoganites, people that like Erdogan and the referendum, or claim to. Maybe they're paid shills, who knows. They come on and say, oh, this was a democratic vote, this isn't a dictatorship. Yes, you just scrapped your democracy in favor of dictatorship. That's the point. You shouldn't even be able to do that if you've got a functioning republic. That's one thing that the people shouldn't be doing, is installing a dictator that then... what's the point of holding a democratic vote if you don't even like the concept of a democratic vote or representative government? Conflating what Erdogan has become now because of this referendum, which will apparently be contested, I doubt that will work. Conflating that role that he now fills with the U.S. presidency is so fucking retarded. It's totally wrong. The U.S. president can't dissolve the legislature on a whim. The U.S. president can't empower bureaucrats and form bureaus and put in their heads to go off and do things and decide that they're legal on his own authority without, generally speaking, the consent of Congress. It's a totally different role that you're talking about. Erdogan is a dictator-like. The U.S. president doesn't have such powers. It has no similarity to our system. It's not the same thing. That's dumb. But in Europe, the fact that Erdogan now has this wide-reaching power is probably a good thing for movements like Front National, like Wilders' party there, or UKIP or something like that, the Swedish Democrats. Now they get to really see what Erdogan policies are like. And you've got to remember, a lot of the people who have migrated to Europe from outside of Europe, who happen to be Islamic, they're Turks. Now, some of these people, they're one of the more secular groups that have moved there. You know, some fucking doctor moved to Germany or something to practice because they wanted to make more money and be maybe in a safer culture, honestly, generally speaking, one that's, you know, less censored than Turkey. And if you're moving to Germany to be less censored, yeah, your country does indeed have problems. But then a substantial proportion of these people voted for the referendum. I have to wonder if some of these folks didn't vote in favor of it, not because of some foreign loyalty diaspora thing, but because they want Turkey to get screwed up so that, like, the rest of their families will migrate. Oh, yeah, my girlfriend refused to move here with me to France. You know, I want her here. So, I'm going to vote for the referendum. It'll make things so bad that I'll be able to convince her to move here. I bet you anything that you scrape up a few dozen people who voted because of that. That's certain at this point. But, some of them have foreign loyalty, of course. That tends to happen. I'm being a little hyperbolic with that one. It's probably only a few people that actually did that. But what does this mean for Eurosceptics? Oh, it's going to be a lot easier to make their case now. Erdogan is going to bring back the death penalty, not something that even a lot of, like, centrist Europeans support, by the way, and some conservative Europeans. A lot of these countries scrapped that idea long ago, to the point you couldn't find somebody to argue for it. So that's not exactly going to ingratiate Erdogan. Sort of this, the Turkish state, both geographically speaking and culturally speaking, bridges the gap between Europe and the Middle East. When people see that gap is now leaning much more towards Middle Eastern-style policies, bring back the death penalty, executive functions of government utterly subjugate a legislative body, no pretense of press freedom, certainly anymore, not necessarily any pretense of fair elections, if they even continue to have them by the time Erdogan's truly old and gray. When the people of Europe see that, it's going to be much harder for them to make the case that what happened in Turkey was good, that they should be in the EU, that maybe they should even stay in NATO, and that there's nothing wrong with all the migrants and refugees and so forth going on in Europe. It's going to give fodder to the Eurosceptics as well. They are going to say, this will be their response, because of the inaction and the ineptitude of Brussels, because they're not capable of putting weight on a country that once professed that it wanted to join the EU in the first place. And this was a big thing for Nigel Farage, specifically on the issue of Turkey, sparring with David Cameron over this, saying, oh, you wanted to admit Turkey. And Cameron, of course, was sweating bullets and said, oh, no, I never said that. Oh, no, they'd have to wait. We'd have to negotiate, and they've got things they have to take care of first. Merkel loves, of course, Erdogan and Erdogan's policies, has no problem with them. In fact, she's a similar brand of totalitarian who acts, in many ways, in an autocratic fashion. It's just a lot of Germans that seem, I don't know why, but they just won't admit to this fact. But those Eurosceptics are going to say, because Brussels was inefficient, because nobody in Europe was willing to put significant weight on the issue, and we saw what Erdogan did in the Netherlands and so forth, which pissed people off there, including people who aren't nativists, they're not populists, they're certainly not Nazis, as Erdogan called them. Because of that, this happened. This happened because Europe was not willing to put any weight on an uprising autocratic force. And it's just like Italy. In Italy, you got a similar referendum. Defeated, but a similar proposal that would have essentially muzzled the legislative body that was there and given over perpetual powers in the form of almost an oligarchy to the entrenched globalists that be there. The idea behind the EU on the Italy issue was it was better to have the uprising of a form of totalitarianism so long as those totalitarians are globalists than to risk having the continuation of liberty but not have globalism there. Because Italy might have, they might no longer want to work with Brussels. They might not want to be Merkel's bitch or something like that. Merkel and people like her, Merkel and what's his name, fucking Tusk or whatever, these people don't care if you're a dictator or if you are the most libertarian, libertine, bohemian on the face of the earth. So long as you like globalism and you don't have a problem with extra federal bureaucracy, post-national bureaucracy, you're fine in their books. They don't care what form of government you have. They look at the patchwork Europe you've got in all these countries. This is why the EU doesn't work. Some of these groups are very, very far left. Some of them are quite conservative. Some of them are extremely authoritarian. Others, they're like, well, we don't care what people do. We like liberty more than anything else. Some of them are more or less politically correct. At the end of the day, the EU authorities don't care so long as they want globalism. So long as they tolerate the fact that most of their laws don't originate in their own countries anymore. So when these same folks fail to act on Turkey, fail to do anything about it, you've got, here's the other funny thing. They're trying to save face. Why do I say that? The globalists, the pro-EU folks in Europe right now, are pretending to be outraged about what just happened in Turkey. Oh, well, this is a sad day. This is just like Brexit or Donald Trump. This has nothing in common with Brexit or Donald Trump. The Brexit was a move towards national sovereignty among a people tired of being abused by a post-national authority that does not represent their best interests and is weakening them. All other European states, there is not a single European state that benefits from the European Union under its current model. Not a single one, not even those that generally are in favor of it. You'd think of Germany or something like that. They don't benefit from it. Donald Trump was a reaction to similar facets of our government here, specifically among marginalized communities in the Rust Belt that didn't feel an economic recovery. If Obama had just given them a few kind words a few times over the last half-decade, it wouldn't have even happened. But he ignored them completely. He crowed about how great our economy was while ignoring half of the country. That's why Donald Trump won. That and the fact that he seemed completely blind, deaf, and dumb when it came to immigration and towards foreign policy, which, by the way, I largely agree with Trump on the North Korea issue. I think he is right. Obama was wrong, assuming that there's any logic behind our intel there whatsoever. They want to pretend that they're all sorts of outraged. At the end of the day, they don't care if Erdogan is a literal dictator in name as well. He's already a dictator after this referendum. Erdogan is a dictator in everything but name. In name, he's still an elected official. In practice, though, since he can dissolve the legislature at any time, what exact constraints on his power continue to exist? None of them, other than a military uprising, and of course with that largely fake coup before, we see that it's not really going to work too well. It seems that he's stacked the military leadership with people loyal to him. Another sort of move that dictators tend to use. Everybody sort of ignored this at the time. But while people were so worried about, like, oh, North Korea is going to conduct a missile test, well, it'll lead to World War III, Turkey just became a dictatorship. And the only silver lining that we can possibly see in this is that it's going to give more ideological, argumentative weight to Eurosceptics. Because it makes the EU, which should have been putting weight on the situation, saying, Mr. Erdogan, this isn't the way to go. This is probably going to screw things up, and you're going to, as far as we're concerned, we're no longer really going to be able to work with you diplomatically. You're talking about bringing back policies that certainly preclude you from being in the EU. We're going to have to condemn it over and over. And they didn't really do that. They mentioned it in passing, and then they leave him alone. Meanwhile, Merkel says, oh, please send some of those other refugees that you have in your country, please send them into Greece and Albania and places like that so they can stream across. And we'll take them in here, but then we'll say, oh, sorry, we don't have any more room. Here's a pass. You can go anywhere else in Western Europe. Go over to France and harass them or something like that. That's what Merkel does. It's almost like a war. If I were French, I'd be extra pissed off. Merkel's waging war on you and you don't even realize it, by using refugees as leverage. Erdogan does the same thing. He does the same thing. And how the hell is it a pro-globalist argument? So what Erdogan did is bad. The EU people tried to do that in Italy not that long ago. It was the same thing in principle. Get rid of everything but the advisory capacity of this legislative body, so that a single legislative body, which is largely going to be stacked by executives there, can run roughshod over people. That's what was opposed by, like, the nationalists and everyone else in both parts of Italy. You know, Italy, kind of a tale of two cultures. You know, northern, sort of alpine Italy, and then you get southern Italy. That's a totally different argument, by the way. It just has some overlap. What happened in Turkey was similar. And these people were in favor of it when it was in Italy. Now they pretend to be outraged because it happens in Turkey. Bullcrap. And those Turks living along the ocean there that largely voted against this, you got to think for a little while about whether you want to remain in your country. I don't know that you're going to be able to go to Europe for very much longer, because a lot of those countries, they're going to see this. That's going to be another thing that spurs on Euroscepticism. When the EU cracks, Le Pen aside, whether she wins or loses, I think their election is in 2 days now. Regardless, Euroscepticism is rising in every part of Europe. I can't think of a country there where it's actually fallen away. It'll take hold in Austria the next time around, probably the Netherlands too, by the way. Where are you going to go? You're going to be stuck. Unless you want to go to Saudi Arabia, Iran, you'll have to go to Egypt to find a more peace-loving culture. At some point, you're going to have to go be Egyptians or something. Isn't that surreal? Yeah, Ataturk. He's spinning in his grave. He's going to be able to generate power by putting a dynamo on his coffin. It's crazy. But at least it'll spur on Euroscepticism, because maybe if the EU dissolves and these European states have the balls to form something more voluntary, they can actually get something positive accomplished in the world. That's about all. Peace out.